Good morning. Good morning to Joe.
Joe, we're happy to have you. You're our expert on the show. You're our expert host. Joe Wolverton is a constitutional attorney and a very knowledgeable individual. He writes many, many articles. I mean, you're writing so many articles that I can't keep up with everything. I think you wrote 4 or 5 this week, and very well written, very much needed here in this country. Joe, happy to have you here this morning.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Orion. Happy to be here among Greek heroes.
Thieves. A man among
well,
thieves.
I'm not going to say that, but, if the metaphor is apt, others can apply it.
Well, I'll tell you, we've got some interesting topics to discuss this morning, and I loaned my copy of today's topics to our chief engineer, and he still has it, so I'm hoping that he's going to stand up and bring it over to me so I know exactly. But I think our first topic this morning is about drones.
Yes, sir.
Drones are I just read an article that you wrote, and it said that even here in the United States, they're planning on putting in the air 30,000 additional drones. Why would we need to have drones to keep an eye on the American people? Are they expecting that we're all going to be potential terrorists?
Well, I don't think they expect that we are potential terrorists. They've already called us terrorists in the fact that, since 2009, the threat from the Liberty Movement has been called the threat of homegrown terrorism. And the drones, of course, are a way to keep us all under the never-blinking eye of government, Paul. It's you can get that drone, and we're not talking necessarily Predator drones. We're talking much smaller vehicles that can get right up by your windows. And, of course, as of November 2012, the drones that are owned by the Department of Homeland Security, they are equipped with a little laser manufactured by a company called Genia Laboratories. This little laser, in 1/1 of a second, can read 2,000 square feet of space, and it can penetrate through drywall and through concrete. And surprise, surprise, the little Genia Laboratories laser is designed to detect trace amounts of gunpowder. So you've got these hooked onto your little drone, and you fly that drone within 150 feet of a house, and in faster than you can blink your eye, they've got your house scanned for gunpowder. So these drones, obviously, are the weapon of choice for the Obama administration when it comes to putting those last few bricks in the prison, Paul.
I'll be honest with you, until I read your article, I was not aware, and some other things you've written and I've read, I did not know that they had that capability. I didn't know they could look right through the roof of my house, down into my home, and it could detect certain substances that they want to see, such as gunpowder, and who's in the home, and I understand they have some very sophisticated listening devices to listen to what's going on. Doesn't this smack of George Orwell's 1984 and Big Brother?
Absolutely
as a
is.
matter of fact, maybe does it surpass it a little bit?
Oh, I think the technology, if you read 1984, the technology we're using today would make George Orwell laugh for the notion that such things could be possible. But it is possible, and these drones, like you say, 30,000 of them in the next couple of years, will be airborne over the skies of America, keeping an eye on all of us, making sure that we're not doing things that the establishment would not be happy with. And someday that probably includes going to church, Orion.
They could probably tell if you're eating a bowl of Cheerios or having bacon and eggs.
Look, right now, absolutely, or peanuts for breakfast.
Oh,
peanuts for breakfast.
That's right. But the thing that worries me most, and should worry all Americans, is these drones. They're not like human beings. Their eyes don't blink. They record everything they see in living, vivid detail. And that's a Fourth Amendment violation, because the law enforcement and the government, in any of its many aspects, is not permitted to neither search nor seize anything from a person, including surveil them, unless that person they have probable cause to believe that person has committed a crime.
Now, that article in the Bill of Rights was put there after the Constitution had been written, and there are certain of our governmental leaders at the time, our founding fathers, who were not satisfied with not specifically detailing certain rights And some people, as you said in our last show, well, they didn't want them enumerated because they were afraid that that would actually have the cause of limiting some of the rights, because everything that was not specifically guaranteed or specifically delegated to the federal government remained in the hands and in the control of the state governments and the individuals.
That's right.
And so some people, even good people, fought against having the Bill of Rights, but the vote won out and the Bill of Rights won, and they said, no, there are certain things we want to enumerate to make sure that no one ever tramples on those. The right of free speech, the right of exercise of our religious freedoms, the right of illegal search and seizure, the right to bear arms. Many of those things they wanted spelled out, and this literally goes right in the face of the Fourth Amendment, saying that they should not be spying on us. Is that not the case?
That is exactly the case, and the main point of contention is that these drones, they are surveilling, for another word, Americans who are not accused of anything. And that's the threshold over which such things must pass, Paul. You have to have probable cause, good reason to believe that someone is breaking the law before the government is permitted to watch them. But in today's world, we are being watched every minute of every day, including the things we do online, the things we say on the phone, everything. And that is all.
And they might even be listening to this radio show today.
I imagine they are. Yes, sir.
Now, here's one of my issues, and
Okay.
Let's first talk. And we only got a minute left until we have a hard break, but this is not just happening in the United States. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised that it's happening in the United States. There have been intrusion in Africa, Asia, the Pacific. What is going on? Why are we spying on all of these people worldwide? And that would be more of a reason than the United States. But hasn't there been some people that have died? I mean, hasn't there been thousands of people that have died without having due process to find out if they were guilty, or collateral damage to citizens? What's going on?
Absolutely, Paul. And the thing I always tell people is when they say, well, we can't afford to go in and get these people, we just need to kill them because they're threats to the security of the homeland. I remind them that, bin Laden was public enemy number one, and he looted the best of the special forces for a decade, but we finally got him. So if we can get him, we can probably get any of these people that we suspect of posing a threat to the homeland. Bring them in and do like we do as Americans and allow someone to answer the charges against them. Because remember, those tactics used against foreigners will be used against us next.
Folks, we're going to be talking about nullification, state nullification, after this break. We're glad to have you here on the New American Review, KHQN 1480. Welcome back to Utah Faces and Places here on KHQN Radio. And as usual, every Monday morning, we have the pleasure of having constitutional attorney Joe Wolverton with us to represent the New American Magazine. You're one of the main contributors to that very fine, I guess that's an internet magazine as well as a printed magazine, is it not?
It is. Every day we have fresh articles going up from me and from our other reporters, and we do have a print magazine that comes out every 2 weeks, and we try to keep up to date with everything that's going on and look at everything through a constitutional lens. As I like to tell people, the New American Magazine is the in-flight magazine of the liberty movement.
Now, how do people subscribe to that magazine if they want to know about it?
They can send their check to Joe Wolverton. No, I'm just teasing. They can go to thenewamerican.com. Make sure you put the in there, THE, thenewamerican.com, and there are links there to get a good discount on subscriptions to the magazine. And while you're there, go ahead and click on all the articles that are for free on the website that give you all the up-to-date information on what's going on around the world and in our country, and particularly a unique, constitutionally conservative view of the news. And the one thing that I think that everyone from Art Thompson at the JBS and Jack McManus has mandated that we do, and I think is an important thing, is we include links to all the sources that we use in our stories. None of these articles are just written up there and thrown up there for people to believe without checking it out. We encourage people to click those links, read the documents themselves, and see if they come to a different conclusion.
All right, so, Joe, let's talk about let's segue right in from the intrusions upon the rights of our citizens to be free from unwarranted searches and seizures. That the Constitution guarantees us that. It's interesting that King George. This is one of the main things. We spoke about this last night with my son-in-law, or my brother-in-law, who also studied Constitution and went to law school, and his whole issue is talking about two of the main reasons that the revolution came about is because King George was sending troops right into the homes of the people who lived in this nation back in the late 1700s, and they were just going through their private papers and looking for if someone had papers without stamps, and if they had tea that had not been taxed and that sort of thing. And so there was no rights whatsoever by the people, and this is one of the reasons our nation was even formed. It was for the protection of that specific right. And here they're intruding into our homes with modern technology, looking right through the walls and the roofs of our home, even concrete, and seeing what we have, what we're doing, and if we have our constitutionally protected firearms in our homes.
Absolutely. They are doing that, and they are doing that. And another thing that we like to focus on at the New American is that we don't have constitutional rights. We have rights given to us by God that are protected by the Constitution.
That's right.
And one of the main ones, as you say, is the right to be free from searches and unwarranted searches and seizures. And as you rightly say, our founding fathers, that was one of the main sticking points with King George. Anybody who is listening or watching today, if you want to do yourself a kindness today and do the cause of liberty a kindness, please read the Declaration of Independence. Print yourself off a copy from the internet. Go to the Google, like all the kids do, right, Orion? Go to the Google. Right. Print off the Declaration of Independence. Take yourself a red pen and just mark every one of the things that Thomas Jefferson accused George III of that justified, in the minds of our founding fathers, breaking our ties with the crown of Great Britain. And you will see that every one of them is being committed today in spades. And primary among them, like you say, is sending the agents of government to survey our private papers and our private associations. And they are doing that today. And the Fourth Amendment, like so many of the other amendments, has been erased by the last couple of administrations who are determined to turn this country into a gulag.
Well, okay, so that segues right into what we're going to talk about next, and it's how can we prevent this? And there are several ways, several things we can do. One is to send good representatives to Congress, another is to contact the ones that are there. But there are ways that we literally can take legal steps, and one of those is state nullification.
Absolutely.
What is nullification?
Nullification
I know it comes in different sizes, forms, and reasons, but what is nullification, generally speaking?
Simply put, nullification is the right of states to hold as null, void, and no legal effect any act of the federal government that exceeds its constitutionally enumerated powers. So if there's something the federal government does that exceeds the powers granted to it by the states in the Constitution, the states, as creators of the Constitution, as the creators of the compact, have the right to disregard and not to enforce those unconstitutional acts of the federal government. It only makes really logical sense. And the thing that I will say is, like I've said before, imagine that you're in an HOA, in a neighborhood where you have a homeowners association, and you sign one of those covenants that they have, right? My wife and I live in a neighborhood with an HOA, and you have to keep your grass a certain length, and you can't park cars in front of your house, and you can't paint your house purple, and those sorts of things. And all of us agree to it. And it's perfectly reasonable to think that you would have a homeowners association covenant. But now if the homeowners association put a letter on our door saying, hey, you've got to go out and buy a red Buick today, or you're getting kicked out of the neighborhood, or we will come in and seize your car, none of us would even think that made any sense, and none of us would do it, particularly since that power was not given to the HOA in the contract we signed. Yet for some reason, day after day, states are allowing the federal government to get away with telling us to do things that they're not allowed to tell us to do. And we keep paying the bills for it, unfortunately, when in reality states, and James Madison said it best, these states are designed to be the bulwarks of liberty. They're supposed to be the protection of liberty when the federal government gets out of hand. They never surrendered this sovereignty, never. And for people who say the Civil War settled the issue of nullification, all the Civil War settled is that might makes right. When your neighbor and you have a disagreement over the location of the boundary line separating your two properties, and you're standing out there arguing about it, and your neighbor punches you in the face, that doesn't make his opinion of the property line the legal definition of the property line. That only means might makes right. The law is still the law, and there is a clear line around the powers of the federal government. It's time for the states, through nullification, to stand up and say, no more. We created you for specific purposes. We've defined those purposes in the Constitution, and if you step over those purposes, well, we're just going to ignore the very thing you're asking us to do because you don't have the power to ask us to do that.
Well, now, let me ask you a question. Government actually created the nation, and then they gave us rights as citizens of their government. Is that the way that it was intended by the Founding Fathers, or is that the way it has become?
No, sir, but that is the way it has become. The government, rights given to us by the government are revocable by who? The government. Rights given to us by God are revocable by God. So it's as simple as that. When you have the notion firmly planted in the hearts and minds of citizens of this country that the rights protected by the Constitution were not given by the Constitution, but were given to us by God and merely protected by the Constitution, then I think you'll see a new great awakening where people understand that it's time to start standing up to the federal government and be forceful advocates of liberty the way our founding fathers were.
So now, if we're not strong enough to do that individually, we can elect members of our state legislatures to stand up for those rights. Now, you spoke last year to the Utah legislature as a professional expert witness to tell about these things. And my understanding is, and I've spoken to several, we have the legislature here on this radio program every Thursday, and I was surprised to see how many people are not even aware of the concept of state nullification of federal powers.
Well, the federal government has done a good job over the past several generations of disabusing people of the notion that they have the power to withstand federal tyranny. I mean, they do control the schools, after all, and they do control the media, after all. And over the past 100 years or so, they have convinced everyone that the federal government is supreme. They quote Article 6 of the Constitution and say, whenever a law is passed by the federal government, it is supreme to any state law, which is a misreading of Article 6. First of all, don't ever call Article 6 the Supremacy Clause. It is not the Supremacy Clause. And what it says is, when the federal government passes a law in pursuance of its constitutional powers, then it is the supreme law of the land. It does not say when the federal government passes a law in defiance of its constitutional powers that it is the law of the land. As a matter of fact, when you read Article 6 in concert with the 10th Amendment, you know that the states not only have a right, but have an obligation to stand up against federal tyranny.
Yep. And that is the difference, that the interaction of those two words that they've chosen
Absolutely.
To color in their own hue. These people are supposed to be our servants. The government's supposed to be our servant to protect our rights. And so it now appears that instead of protecting us against tyranny, they are the authors of it. And I suppose I'll be the first one in the FEMA camp when this all comes about, but I'll wear it with honor, a badge of honor, because someone has got to stand up and be counted. I know so many friends, Joe, and so many friends, Orion, that tell me that they don't want to be recognized of fighting against this government for the fear of consequences. And isn't that a sad, sad commentary?
Well, we've come a long way. We are not our father's children, that's for sure. I mean, we have come, we come from a good stock, but we've gotten away from our upbringing. We have people like Charles Carroll, who signed the Declaration with his address so that if King George's agents wanted to come hang him, they'd know right where to find him. You've got John Hancock, who signed it big enough. You've got Nathan Hale. I regret that I have but one life to give for my country. You've got people saying, Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. And today we say, give me fast internet service or give me death. We are not our father's children, or we would be, as you say, exercising a little more powerful resistance to tyranny, because we do come from those people, and those people never once said they were afraid. Oh, they admitted they were afraid. And if you read the book, Lossing's book, The Lives of the Signers of the Declaration, you'll read of the horrible things that the government of King George did to some of these men who pledged their lives and their sacred honor and their fortune to the cause of liberty. But today we're lucky if we can pledge an hour or two of our day in the cause of liberty.
So, in conclusion, talking about state nullification, what rights did the state have in order to neutralize what's happening from the federal government and the powers that they're trying to usurp?
Two things. Number one, the citizens must keep state legislators informed of this right. They should flood the email and phone banks of these state legislators. Remind them of the right to nullify. And then state legislators need to pass bills reminding the federal government of who the master and who the servant is.
Thank you.
The duration of the war on terror. Well, the entire Congress and the President himself has sent $15 billion to Al-Qaeda, but none of them have been indefinitely detained because we are in the last days of Rome where the laws do not apply to the lawgivers.
Well, that brings us up to one of our topics that we were going to discuss this morning. And it seems to me, Joe and Orion, that those people that the things that they shouldn't have a right to know, such as what we're doing in the privacy of our homes and the rights given to us by God, protected by the Constitution, they ignore those, and yet things that we should have the right to know, they keep a secret.
That's right. I mean,
and they are supposed to be our servants. Now, one of those is what we call the Pentagon Secret Wars. In an article you recently wrote, did you write that article?
Yes, sir.
Okay, young don't have the right to know. In other words, those of us who are citizens of the United States, we don't have the right to know if we are at war with any country in the world.
Absolutely. And what's worse is...
I mean, they say that. The Pentagon is saying we don't have the right to know who we're at war with. Aren't all of the wars, according to the Constitution, only to be declared by Congress, only to be declared by the House of Representatives?
Absolutely. Any war has to be declared by Congress. We haven't had a declared war since World War II. But that didn't stop thousands and thousands of Americans from being killed by being ordered about by the president all over the world. And as you pointed out, the article that I wrote, when a spokesman for the Pentagon was asked if he could enumerate all the places around the world where we're currently killing people in the name of the United States, he said, we're not going to tell you because if we told you, then that might alert some of the enemies. Well, that's about circular logic. We're not going to tell you because if we tell you, we'd have to tell you. I mean, what I found most interesting is when you read, and again, like I say, these documents are all linked in the article. When you read the article and read the places where we're currently carrying on combat operations, your jaw just falls open. You cannot believe that we're in these countries. I mean, some of them you expect.
Well, maybe these people don't know we're at war with them when they fly over with our jets and bomb their cities and send drones and kill their neighborhoods.
Right.
Maybe they're not aware that.
Well, when you've got somewhere like Pakistan and Yemen, and now you use these things called double tap strikes and signature strikes. Here's what signature strike, for example, when we're talking about these wars that we're carrying around all over the world, that the Pentagon says. Remember, ladies and gentlemen who are listening and watching, the Pentagon, your government is telling you do not have the right to know where we're at war. And one of these things that they use, speaking of the drones and the worldwide wars, is they will use what's called signature strikes. Now, the CIA defines a signature strike as using a preemptive, deadly force against a group of people who have demonstrated some sort of tie to terrorism. Now, this is the analogy I use. Let's suppose your uncle is in the mafia. Your dad's brother's in the mafia. Everybody knows it. You know it. Your dad's not in the mafia. You're not in the mafia, but his brother's in the mafia. Your uncle dies. You and your family go to the funeral of your uncle. None of you ever been guilty so much as stealing bubble gum. Well, the CIA, using their logic under the signature strikes, can kill everyone at your uncle's funeral because they have ties to someone who has ties to crime. That is immoral as it gets, and this is being done every day. Tomorrow, Tuesday, is the day that the president has set aside for his meeting in the Oval Office, where he decides who on the kill list is going to get targeted. Every Tuesday is his day that he sits down with his national security team, and they go through the flashcards of all the enemies, and they decide who they're going to kill. And not one of these people, no matter how despicable, deserve to die without being allowed the right to defend themselves against the charges. Because remember, as I say over and over and over again, ask not for whom the bell tolls, because it tolls for thee. You may not think there's any problem with killing a bunch of people at the funeral of a Pakistani terrorist. But let me tell you, brothers and sisters, that same technology and that same justification will someday be used here at home. As Paul said at the top of the show, we've got 30,000 drones going live in the next couple of years, and it won't be long until those of us who are attending church, those of us who are attending Liberty meetings, are being watched and cataloged, and every movement, every conversation, every action we take is being recorded and cataloged up at Point of the Mountain to someday be held against us. So, as we say, they're around the world fighting terrorism. Well, terrorism is a tactic, not a crime. So let's have people accused of things, and if they are guilty of threatening us, well, let's get after them with all the force we can muster.
Me thinketh that King George would blush.
Oh my gosh, I write that all the time, Paul. I say, if Nero had the power of Barack Obama, we'd all still be speaking Latin. I mean, there's no question about it. The King George, someday when Barack Obama dies, King George is going to run up to him and say, "Man, how did you do it? How were you able to hold on so long? I'm so impressed. I'm not worthy of your presence, King Barack."
Do we know where these drones are being launched from?
Well, I'll tell you. Now, this is an interesting thing. We're getting back to the drones, but I'll tell you, one of the most interesting things that I discovered is that, there are 6 sites being considered in the United States for these drone locations, 6 domestic sites. Well, Governor Herbert of our own Beehive state has a whole section of his website devoted to trying to convince the federal government to make Utah one of the 6 domestic sites for drone fleets. He is over the moon about a little more of that federal funding. And, of course, we know that we made sweetheart deal to get the NSA here at Point of the Mountain and get that big thing there. So, yeah, I would put dollars to donuts that someday we're going to have a nice drone fleet right here in Utah for sure.
To match our listening station, the NSA listening station at the Point of the Mountain.
How easy is that? And, of course, we've got Adobe across the street. Who knows what's going on there?
Yes.
I mean, I can't think it's coincidence that you've got one of the most powerful internet companies across the street from the National Security Agency. I don't know.
Well, okay, so back to the secret wars. What is the Americans' right to know what's going on in their country? It's not the government's country. It's we the people's country. And why do they have the right? And by the way, I thought the Vietnam War was actually a war. I thought the Korean War was actually a war. I thought the war in Afghanistan was actually a war. Now, just by the slide of the pen or the changing semantic of a word, it's no longer a word. It's no longer a war. Just like a coup is no longer a coup, just because someone in power decides not to use the specific word to describe it. Since the Constitution specifically states that Constitution only has the right to declare war, why has this been changed, and what are the results of this, and why don't we have the right to know, Joe?
Well, Paul, I'll tell you, it's because it depends on what the meaning of the word is, yes. Paul. That's our illustrious former leader. Words don't have meaning, and the important thing is, marriage doesn't have a meaning, coup doesn't have a meaning, war doesn't have a meaning. None of these words have meanings, because when you erase the meanings, when you deracinate, when you take these meanings away from their roots, then they can mean anything you want to, just like the Constitution. When you take it away from the Christian roots from which it grew, then you can interpret these things to mean anything, and we have the right to know. And this is one of the Founding Fathers' most important sticking points. Again, we have the right to know what the government is doing in our name. Now, as you say, wars can only be declared by Congress. Well, Congress doesn't act in secret. If they're going to vote, they're going to vote, and we're going to know it. And we're going to have the right, and they're going to plan it, put it on the calendar, and we have the right to come to communicate with our federal representatives and say, no, we don't want to go to war with Turkey. We don't want to have troops in Kyrgyzstan. We don't want to have drone bases in Kosovo. But we don't do that because they're no longer wars. They are merely combat operations to protect us from terrorists. And so when you erase all the meanings of those words, you can pretty much do whatever you want to, and they keep us in complete secrecy. You know, it's like my friend up in Washington used to tell me all the time. The American people are like mushrooms. They grow best when you keep them in the dark and feed them BS.
You know, the Korean conflict was a police action. Mm-hmm. Now, I was there as a Marine, and that was in 1950 when they started this thing. I was there as a Marine, but I was never a policeman, and they still have a demilitarized zone there. We still have troops in Korea, and what we got, 50, 63 years, and we still have troops over there.
Absolutely.
And they never did declare a war, but there was a lot of people were killed and slaughtered in that conflict.
Absolutely. And think about the moral implication of that, Orion. I mean, you think about you yourself know people that are today in their grave because of the Korean conflict. And what does that say of our government's value of human life when we don't have the morality anymore in this country? And it's been, like you say, it's been, 60 years now. We don't have the morality to say we value human life so much that we are going to follow the Constitution, and we are going to have a vote, and we are going to declare war the proper way, so that the people know when we're going to war, we're doing so reluctantly. That spirit has gone from us. We go looking for places to stir up trouble now. These worldwide wars that we're talking about, that we're not allowed to know they're happening. And I encourage you to read the article. Your mouth will, like I say, your jaw will slack open when you read all the places that we currently have combat operations going on. And we're doing this, and we're stirring up trouble, and we're creating many more enemies than we're ever destroying, Paul. I will guarantee you that.
Okay, now, so just so our listeners know, this is the new review, the New American Review show, and I'm sorry, but we are reviewing a magazine that is an internet magazine as well as a published magazine called the New American, and you can find that by going to thenewamerican.com, thenewamerican.com, and you can read about these articles. We'll talk to you right after this break. Now, where you find that, folks?
I have a good idea of how to get back at them.
Okay, folks, welcome back to the New American Review, and I left out American during the break. I apologize for that, but there's a magazine called thenewamerican.com. You can go there and see it online and read these great articles, or you can subscribe to the hard copy.
Do both.
And you can tweet these articles, you can share them, you can put them on Facebook. This is one of the ways we talked about the very first time we were together, Joe, was one of the greatest things that we have in our arsenal is education.
Absolutely.
If we learn the truth will set us free. If you get the truth out there, you're going to win eventually. They may oppose it, they may fight it, they may call you a liar, but eventually truth is going to win.
There are enough people out there with good hearts and good minds who, when presented with the truth, will accept it and then go on to defend it. And, you talk about Twitter and Facebook. Please do that. Please take the information first of all, read it yourself, and once you've been educated, go educate others, and send this out on Twitter, send it out on Facebook, talk about these things so that it becomes a buzz. We need to get a buzz going so that these people in Washington know that we are not asleep at the wheel.
Which apparently we are, unless we can wake ourselves up.
That's right.
Now, Joe, there's an article that appeared for the first time this morning by our good friend and co-host William F. Jasper. Mm-hmm. And the article is entitled, Feds Caught in Lies Say We'll Come Clean, Don't Bet on It. Now, we as Americans over the last couple of months have seen just tremendous lying to Congress on Capitol Hill. This doesn't seem to be, without impunity. There seems to be no accountability. Lying to Congress, as many of our listeners know, is against the law. It is punishable by prosecution, indictment and prosecution and penalty. But it seems that they are above the law, and presidents and congressmen and heads of departments and others who are supposed to be our servants can lie to Congress with impunity.
And they are doing it. We have the story that I wrote a week or so ago about Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, who absolutely lied to Congress. I mean, go to the videotape, as our friends at Monday Night Football would say. Let's go to the videotape, Orion.
Well, and then you even have President Obama himself coming out in public in a speech saying and calling what is going on in the government, claiming and accusing us of making up these what does he call them, false crisis, what is it? Phony scandals. It's actually now not only are they not guilty, we're guilty of claiming that these scandals are even effect.
We're creating it out of thin air. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, he didn't lie to us. Mike Rogers didn't lie to us. The NSA's not snooping on us. Come on. They wouldn't do that. They have our best interest. It's all for the children.
Okay,
Paul.
so
they're protecting the children and the old people.
That's it. So,
and if you don't back what they're doing, then you must hate children and old people and liberty and apple pie.
Well, you've got the blueprint down and the game plan down. Well, you know it.
That's right.
We've seen it so many times, and I think a lot of people are waking up. People are getting fed up with what's going on. But one of the articles that we're talking about today, you just mentioned Mike Rogers, and now there is an article in the New American called "Who Lied? Mike Rogers, the NSA, and X Key Score." What are these things? And the article that Bill Jasper wrote just this morning, the feds are caught in lies, and they're saying they're going to come clean, and don't bet on it. What is this article about Mike Rogers? Who is Mike Rogers?
Mike Rogers is a liberal Michigan congressman, Republican, I should say. Has an R after his name, so he must be a good guy. But he at Congress, first of all, he stood up and spoke against and voted against his colleague from Michigan, Justin Amash, voted against his amendment that would have curtailed the NSA's surveillance power, would have forbidden it from using money to collect any of its federal funds, from collecting phone records from innocent Americans. Well, Mr. Rogers Mr. Rogers puts his sweater on, changes his shoes, gets up there, and in the neighborhood of the Potomac decides to tell everyone that if you vote to curtail the NSA's surveillance power, then you're essentially voting to expand Islamist jihad throughout the United States. But, the question that needs to be asked of Mr. Rogers and the rest of them is, how many terrorist attacks on the United States have been stopped because the NSA is recording all of our phone calls? How many have been stopped? I will tell you right now. I will act as a prophet. I will look in the Karnak the Magnificent.
Okay.
I will put the envelope to my head. 0. No terrorist
attacks. Wait a minute.
attacks.
Not even the marathon in Boston was stopped by all the surveillance?
But was the marathon bombing? It wasn't stopped. There are dead people. It was not stopped.
Let's see, now I can name others.
This just in. Kennedy shot in Dallas. This just in. The people were killed in Boston. It was not stopped. And the problem is, Mike Rogers is in the pocket of the establishment, as are about 433 others of them. And they are going to lie to keep this going. Let's be what our fathers were. Let's call a spade a spade. They are lying. I don't want to say they're hiding the truth or spinning. They're not spinning. They're lying.
What state is Mike Rogers from?
Michigan.
Okay. Now they're a very healthy state. Detroit,
moving along as always.
And all of these liberal policies have really saved Michigan and Detroit.
They have three-bedroom house there for $12,000.
Absolutely. Well, the point is, and you've got these things that we all, at the New American, we've been covering since the beginning. Glenn Greenwald contacted me at the very beginning and said, this is all coming out about the NSA. And we've been covering it from the beginning. They go to Congress when they're called to testify, and they lie, and they continue to lie. And the thing is, what do we do to combat it? What do we do? Well, we need to, like you said earlier, we need to elect congressmen who are committed to adhering to their oath of office, to being faithful to their oath of office. But the worst thing we've got going is the fact of something that I I wrote just a couple of days ago. Now we've got news coming out. You've got Keystone, where you got Prism, where they're following us on the internet. You've got the phone records that they've been taking from everyone, not just people suspected of crimes, but everyone. They've got all that, and now we've got word coming out that through court documents that we've subpoenaed and got copies of, we found out that the FBI, the NSA, and other federal agencies are now using remote access to your Android smartphone and to your laptop computer to remotely turn on the microphone and turn on the camera on your Android smartphone and your Windows laptop. So now when you're sitting at home thinking you're watching TV, you've got your computer open, or you've got your Android smartphone sitting on the desk, the federal government can use hacking tools, tools developed by hackers. They can use these tools now to install something on your phone and on your computer without you ever knowing it, and then turn those microphones and turn those cameras on without you ever knowing it, to where you will literally be under the watchful eye of government 24 hours a day.
Well, as a matter of fact, I saw on YouTube they had gone in and remotely turned on the cameras and the microphones of someone's laptop, and they had the camera turned on while the married couple was in their bed being personal.
Good.
And then they broadcast those regularly. There's actually an internet site that broadcasts those regularly. You're in your home, you're in your living room, you're in the kitchen with your family. They go in remotely and hack your computer, turn on the microphone and turn on your camera and watch whatever you're doing, even getting out of the shower. I mean, there's a website that is doing that regularly, showing that. They have tremendous capabilities. But I want to know, okay, I wish there was a website that was available that listed all the good guys and all the bad guys. Now, everyone's not always good and always bad, but the New American Review is here to tell you that there is a place to go where you can see what the voting record is of our congressmen and our senators. And that is called what, Joe?
The Freedom Index, Paul.
Okay. And exactly what is the Freedom Index, and where do people find it? Because I just looked up Mike Rogers, who is supposedly a moderate Republican, and he only votes half the time according to the principles of the Constitution and freedom and the limitation of the principles of tyranny in government.
I personally love the Freedom Index because it destroys some of what we think we know, and that's sometimes the best thing to do. Take to the Freedom Index. It has a list of all the federal...
How do they find it?
TheNewAmerican.com, and there's a link there, the Freedom Index.
At the top, on the horizontal bar on the top, the main bar, the main navigation bar, the Freedom Index is there. Click on it, and then go to your congressmen, your senators, and look at their voting records.
And then make a copy of that, copy and paste it into an email them and say, this is not acceptable. We will not accept that half the time you obey your oath. Paul, do you think your wife would be okay if half the time you were faithful to your marital oath?
And, isn't it incredible? Isn't it simply incredible that these people raise their hand and they take an oath to defend the Constitution, to obey it, to defend it, to support it, to protect our rights, and it is universally. Why do we do it? Why should we even administer it?
And I think that will someday be the point. I mean, it reminds me of what Cicero, the great Roman lawyer and orator, once said about Rome. He said, "The day used to be that we prosecuted traitors more than the most ferocious foreign enemy. But those days are no more. We do not punish traitors in this country. We reward them with getting reelected year after year. The re-election rate in Congress is at 97%. Every year we send the same scoundrels back in there, and we expect things to change. That is the very definition.
Isn't there, for taking a false oath and not subscribing to it, isn't there some kind of penalty for that? Shouldn't there be?
There is absolutely a penalty. I'll know on the state side, when we're talking about our state legislators not standing up to their oath, there are provisions in the Utah State Constitution for holding accountable those representatives who do not adhere to their oath to protect, preserve, and defend the Constitution.
Folks, we're out of time. Great topics. We appreciate you having here, Joe.
Thank you. I love being
Wolverton,
here.
a constitutional attorney, and also to you, Orion Marler.
Oh, it's great to be
Join us
sitting
next
in here
week.
today.
KHK.